Today, we are focusing on what it takes to get published in an academic journal, specifically how to do research in a digital world. Joining us today, we have Dr. Esther Laufer, who is the director of the Center for Advanced Internet Studies College, or CASE, in Bochum, Germany. We have Dr. Janet Salmons, who is from the United States. Her CASE project is Ethical Design of Online Qualitative Research, Updating Models and Offering Ways to Apply Them. We also have Professor Dr. Edlin Anugum, who is from Nigeria. His CASE project is The Gig Economy and Labour Precarity in Nigeria, Evidence from the FinTech Sector. Azadeh Shamsi, MA, is from Iran. Her CASE project is Digital Feminist Activism and Imagining the Future, case study of the Woman Life Freedom Movement in Iran. Full bios for our speakers will be included in the follow-up email if you would like to learn more. My name is Georgina Savage. I'm a marketing executive working with the books marketing team at Sage. You'll notice at the bottom of the screen there is a Q&A chat box. Please send us your questions throughout the webinar. The first half of the webinar will be a presentation, and then we'll move to a Q&A session where we will try to answer as many of your questions as possible. However, time constraints may not allow us to answer every question, so we will follow up with you after the webinar. Next, I'm going to hand over to Janet to go over the agenda for today's webinar.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're all here together in an unusual situation that we actually are in the same building at the Center for Advanced Internet Studies in Bochum. And today we have a very simple agenda. We're each going to talk a little bit about our projects, and Esther will talk a little bit about the Fellows Program, and then we will open it up for our conversation with you. Next. So before we go on, I just want to say that, the big question for the webinar about how to do research in a digital world is a huge and complex topic that we can't possibly handle in 1 hour. But what we can do is come together and share our experiences and then open the virtual doors to conversation with you. So to get started, Esther, could you just tell us a little bit about why it's important to have a center like this and to have interdisciplinary exchange amongst people who are studying digital culture and using digital methods?
Yes, thank you very much, Janet. Thank you for inviting me. It's very nice of you. Yes, so CAIS was founded in 2017, and the original idea was really to create like a special place where people could meet who would not encounter each other in other settings, like at the same departments or at the same conferences. And that's just because the digital transformation, which is our topic, is just such a complex and global process that affects like almost every aspect of our lives. And we felt that it's just simply not enough to study this topic in kind of single disciplines or even like from a single kind of national perspective. So we created this fellowship program to really invite people here to Bochum so they could come together and discuss it like in a broader perspective. And everyone, of course, brings like their own expertise here, and people just learn a tremendous amount from each other. And it's always very exciting to see what happens when you bring all these like really diverse people together. And yeah, and if you just, I think it's just a matter of the topic of the digital transformation. If you just think of like a topic like, let's say, platform governance, it's clear that it's just not enough to approach it like from a national perspective. Different nations need to come together to really make an impact. And likewise, it's just not enough to approach it from a single disciplinary perspective. You need like your lawyers, you need like psychologists, you need like people who are like experts in politics and so on and so on. And we really wanted to just like create a space for that. And we do that in two ways. We have like the fellowships, which is what you guys are part of course. That is, we invite researchers from all around the world for 3 months or for 6 months to kind of come here to concentrate, but also importantly to talk to each other about their research projects. And we have the working groups, which you also see on the screen, which is like if you already have a group of people, but you're not in the same place, you can apply to come together here in Bochum and really concentrate on your research, have like a really deep dive over like a couple of days or even a week. And this is what we offer here at KAIS. And as you see, like we're in the same building. So despite being like an institute on digital transformation, we really believe in the importance of the personal encounter and we want to support that.
Yeah, it's fantastic to have this opportunity. And we also are happy that, with this webinar series, we have the chance to come together virtually and go to the next slide and at least have, some opportunity to exchange across borders. And our focus here today, thinking about broadly digital methods, and it just happens that all of us are qualitative researchers. But, as we think about research design and planning and putting together research projects, it's all about decision making. And we know that, every decision that we make will influence, the direction of the study and the findings that will come out of it. With online research, as we consider the choices that we have to make about methods and methodologies, and whether we're going to collect data from human participants or posts or archives or other non-human sources, each one of those choices, they're not straightforward. We really have to wrestle with them. So one of the things we're going to do today is to look at some of those decisions and see how those of us here are working through that. If you go to the next slide. So I asked my partners in crime here to focus on 3 main questions, to tell us a little bit about the studies they're conducting, the types of data they're collecting, the ways that they collect data, and the reasons why they made those decisions. And so Azada is going to start and talk about her study.
Thank you, Janet. Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here with all of you, to see everybody joining from all over the world. Today, I'm going to talk about actually my online and offline research journey, specifically the decisions that I made about my methodology and my research design. I think what I'll be discussing today might resonate more with researchers who are working on sensitive topics, specifically within the authoritarian context. My research broadly focuses on the platformization of activism and feminist movements in Iran. It revolves around how women in Iran, since the Women Life Freedom movements, have been using social media platforms to communicate their emotion and construct emotion narratives. And how through this emotion sharing, these women are imagining an alternative future for themselves. So I'm interested in the political role of emotion and how affects circulate through narratives or troops of suffering, and also through the narratives of hopefulness. I'm going to give you a bit of context here. As you may know, since the 1979 revolution in Iran and the ruling of Islamic governments in Iran, women have experiencing systematic inequality that can be described as a gender apartheid. One example of this gender discrimination is that wearing hijab for women in Iran is mandatory. In response, Iranian women have fought back against this inequality, first of all, through everyday act of resistance, like pushing back their scarves to show their hair, and in like recent years by unveiling and removing their hijab as an act of protest, both in online and offline spaces. However, since the women life freedom movements, women have gained a stronger voice and a collective confidence, which means that now more women going to the streets regularly without a hijab, and despite the threats of being arrested, being imprisoned, or by the police. Actually, the Women Life Freedom movement started September 2020 as a reaction to death of a 22-year-old woman, Jina Mahsa Amini, and at the hands of morality police for not wearing her hijab properly. Jina's tragic death not only brought up street protest and sent millions of people, specifically women, to the streets of the country. It's brought up a broader reaction against this inequality. Sorry, I think I dropped my headphone. I'm sorry. So alongside this street protest, women started to use social media platforms to show their emotion, their anger, their anxiety, their frustration, and also they use social media platforms to talk about their collective traumas and their experiences, which is rooted in this inequality. And so from the first days of the movement, I decided to archive these women's personal narratives and form a relationship actually with women digital activists. As you know, online ethnography takes a long period of immersion in social media spaces, and in my case, hours and hours of reading women's traumatic experiences and kind of emotional engagements with my topic, and developing an intimate relationship with this woman digital activist. So for the methodology of my research, I decided to go with a mixed methodology to have a more nuanced understanding of this digital activism, and also to see my topic from different angles. I conducted digital ethnography on Twitter and also a critical discourse analysis of social media content, and semi-structured in-depth interviews with women activists inside Iran. Can you please go to the next slide? Yep. And next slide, please. To explain a bit more about the kind of social media data that I gathered, I want to give you one example. These are actually social media contents that I gathered. There are samples of those. Next slide. I came across this image actually, which I chose from this data to talk about it today. I came across this image during the first months of the protest. One of this image, which you can see in this photo, posted this photo on her Twitter account. In this image, these two women having brunch in a coffee house in Tehran. Coffee houses has been traditionally and historically a masculine space in the Middle East. To me, this photo represents women's dreams and desire for an alternative world. Through this image, these two young women could imagine a different future for themselves and for other women, a future where hijab would not be mandatory anymore, and they can have the agency to choose to wear it or not to wear it. And what is powerful about this image to me, I think it's ordinariness. It's about a world that does not exist yet, and it comes to existence through performances, and these performances circulating through social media platforms and generates hope. And I think it's opened a small window into a possible future. However, one of these women who posted a photo was arrested the next day and spent 11 days in prison in Tehran. The other kind of data that I gathered was interview with women digital activists. I think at that time, the easier choice for me was to conduct my interviews online. Because traveling to Iran to interview women on such a topic could be risky. Another risk was for women who were posting their personal narratives online, because social media in Iran is being monitored by the state, and lots of people, men and women, are being arrested for their social media activity. However, I thought if I were to stay hundreds of kilometers away from my country in my safe spot and contact women who put their lives at risk to go to the street protests and at the same time write about their personal narratives online, I would not be able to build a close relationship with them, and they would not open up to me. So I decided to travel to Iran and conduct my interviews in person, and at the same time find ways to keep my participant in and also myself safe. So I chose my interviewees through a snowball sampling to talk to women who I knew in a way, and they could trust me to share their stories on such a sensitive issue. I did most of the interviews in cafes in Tehran while I was sitting beside these women, and both of us were not wearing our hijab as an act of resistance. One of the other challenges for me was protecting my interview recording files. To avoid carrying the recording files during my stay in Iran and while I was passing the border, I decided to record interviews in several files and email them to another email, which I did not have access to on my devices. Internet speed is not that great in Iran, so I had to interrupt the interviewees several times to record the files in smaller sizes and send the files to myself and delete them from everywhere, actually. And I had to do this while I was sitting at the cafe. Those are some of the strategies actually that I chose to overcome the risk in the field, and I can explain more about the other challenges during the Q&A. Now I ask Adeline to continue and talk about his research with you. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Azadeh. We're going to move from Iran to Nigeria. So I'm looking at labor precarity, the gig economy and labor precarity in Nigeria, but focusing essentially on fintech workers, simply because that's a very rapidly growing area in Nigeria currently. The justification is simple, that, of course, there's a huge body of work, literature on precarity, on labor precarity, but the bulk of this has been what you can call theoretical literature. They've not been mostly product of empirical research. And this is actually much more in the case of the global south, or the developing parts of the world. So in Africa, for instance, there aren't many studies of the empirical relationship, between labor precarity and the gig economy. So based on that, this is a study trying to fill that gap, if you like. It is also important to understand that the gig economy or the platform economy is emerging very strongly in developing societies. I know in Nigeria, for instance, it is becoming a very prominent feature of both the formal and informal sectors of the economy. So that's in a brief manner why I decided to look at this study, from this. But generally, I'm going to depend on qualitative data. I see it as mainly a qualitative research. So this means that I'll be looking at documentary data, in terms of records, official memos, and of course, publications from government and government agencies. Actually, this afternoon, I was looking at a very huge report from the National Bureau of Statistics in Nigeria, which covered 2 years, labor reports in Nigeria for 2022 and 2023, which I think is also very good in terms of understanding the dynamics behind the gig economy, especially the so-called precarity in it. Is an assumed thing, and I want to see whether that works, looking especially at fintech workers, like I said before. So, but the primary data will come from in-depth interviews. The in-depth interviews will be with gig workers in the fintech sector, workers who do not have to conform to a 9 to 4 p.m. conventional work routine, workers who also will need to work from different areas, from their homes or wherever they are comfortable. So it's the big challenge methodologically has been how to pin down these workers, especially in terms of the interview we are currently engaged with. So given that practical problem, I had to adopt a practical solution, which is use a mixed approach in data collection. We're going to do the face-to-face interviews and, of course, the online interviews. Face-to-face is important in terms of having the opportunity to probe responses, as well as measure what you can call the nonverbal aspects of communication. Like there's the popular wisdom that each time somebody says something, there are also some parts that are not said. And that is what the face-to-face interviews or interaction will offer us the opportunity to gauge. We're also going to use the online, which means we are going to try to get some of these workers. It is very challenging. In fact, in the proposal, I envisaged this. But so far, we're in the mid-field work. It is becoming very apparent that it was a wise decision, because part of the major problem has been how to pin these workers down. Now, this study is focusing geographically on Lagos. Lagos is one of the most urbanized areas in the global south, and it's very huge for those who have an idea of Lagos. So it's like going through a behemoth, if you like. So we have to be a little bit dynamic, and that is why I think I adopted the mixed approach in terms of collecting data. So it was a practical decision. That's all I want to say. Now, it is obvious in this day and age that if you must make the best of your research, you have to open up and take opportunities provided by digital means. 10 years ago, it wasn't popular. And I think we got to this place, especially in the developing societies, courtesy of the pandemic, because that also made it imperative that people should think about other ways of doing what was the usual thing. So it is very important in this sense, because we are using the internet, of course, and internet-enabled instruments, which are now becoming more and more mainstream. It's no longer before where you could see it was a marginal thing, So that is, in a nutshell, what the research is all about. I think I'm going to talk more maybe when the questions come on. I'm going to go back to Janet now.
Well, I think, it's interesting hearing both of you talk about the decisions that you made with your research, some that were practical and methodological, and the ways that you both collected some data online and some data face-to-face, and made the choices about, particular characteristics that were involved. So, with the online ethnography, being able to collect, that you had kind of the reflection of the real life situations being expressed online, and then being able to actually talk with the people and observe, the situations that people are experiencing in their communities. And then, with yours, you say, well, the online interviews allowed you the flexibility to reach people who, are difficult to schedule, and kind of opened up some of the, so it becomes a, a practical choice as well as a methodological choice. So if you would put the slides back up. So my study is really trying to, look at the ways that we can think through these kinds of decisions. And, I've for years have been writing about this qualitative research framework to look at the ways that each part of the study is interrelated with the other parts in how the technology influences those choices. If you go to the next slide. So, with the questions that, would be common to, any research, and particularly to any qualitative research, take on, a little bit different flavor when there's technology involved. And I think, we heard, in the two studies here, how, some of those choices influenced the, other parts of the research, if you go on. So at this point, I'm looking at this model and trying to see, what additional questions, do people need to think through, what kinds of guidance and models might be helpful to them. And so next slide. So I'm using my case project to, rather than doing a piece of research per se, I'm doing research about research and collecting input about these models, and looking at some of the choices that are available to people with the tools that we have, and the ways that, we can do research in an ethical manner. So let's open it up and see what kinds of questions we have from our audience. So I see you have, I see one question about social media platforms have largely closed off access to researchers globally. So what can we do to ensure access to data for Africans, or should we accept that only scholars in the global north should study social media platforms? So what do you?
Yeah, I think we have the possibility to do it in the south. Of course, it's not like it's in the north. I was talking to a friend yesterday in Nigeria, and I said, look, do you know that in Germany, when you stop at the train station, you can connect free Wi-Fi and do your browsing? And he said, wow, how is that possible? Well, this will tell you the peculiarities or the differences. But for the developing world, I think the most important thing is for you to use online research, you have to be sure, one, of your access to internet. Of course, without access, there can be nothing you do in that sense. So you have to be sure of your access. Then you have to be sure it is reliable. A lot of the problems we have is that even in places where you have access to internet, there's a limit to the bandwidth. So sometimes you have a material you want to, or picture you want to download or look at, you cannot, because you're exceeding your bandwidth. Even in common discussions, sometimes when it is prolonged, the connection starts getting problematic. And I use my own personal experience. I'm a professor in a university, but incidentally, for internet, I depend on my mobile network, which means I have to pay telecom providers. And for me to do real meaningful research, I have to budget a sizable amount of my income every month to buy data. And I know a lot of other people, especially students, cannot afford that. If you come to my university, there are spots where you can have access to internet. And each morning you see large crowd of students gathered there. In fact, for a first-time visitor to the university, you might be, freaked out by the number of students you're going to see gathering in 2 or 3 spots on campus. But when you look closely, you see that each one has his or her laptop. So they are there because that is where they can access internet freely. So it's a challenge, but I don't think it's a challenge that we cannot negotiate. It's all about being adaptable and open to the idea, and perhaps having the economic resources, which is important here.
I've got a question here from Dakota. They write, interviews both online and in person seem key to the research discussed so far. Can you please speak to how you recruited participants for your studies? Does this seem like a question that you guys could speak to?
For me?
Either one.
Well, let me share my experience again. Currently, I'm in Germany, but I have research assistants who are working in Nigeria who started before I started coming. But a lot of my weekend is spent housekeeping in terms of trying to guide them through challenges. It's been real challenging, but what we do first is the real picking of respondents is through the snowball approach, which simply means you see somebody in the fintech sector, you talk to him or her, you say, please, can you direct me to one of your colleagues? Now, there are dynamics of it. In Abuja, for instance, which is the capital of Nigeria, they have circles where you can see a lot of these people. In Lagos, it's a different scenario. So the major problem has been, one, to pin them down. For you to use online, most times, especially in the developing society, you have to make an initial contact one way or the other, because you have to schedule an appointment anyway. You can't just intrude into somebody, So we had to do that. We have used those networks, if you like, going from person to person. But it's been very challenging. One of the firms we are looking at, I had to meet a very senior administrative person there, actually the chief operating officer. And because I wanted a background on the organization, I said, okay, can you do me a questionnaire and send to me online? And I did. And I sent it to him on the 30th of March. Till now, I haven't got a response. And this is a half-page questionnaire. Last week, I wrote him a reminder, and he was very apologetic. But in all sincerity, every time I've interacted with him online, he has either been driving his car or he's in a meeting. And at a point, I had to ask him, don't you have an office space? And he says, look, I carry my office wherever I go. So those are the issues. But you have to establish some kind of contact before you schedule an online interview. It can't happen any other way anyway.
Is there anything you want to add to that about recruiting your participants?
Sure. Actually, as I said, my method of selecting people was on a snowball sampling. So as I said, I was monitoring social media platforms for a long time. So I tried to find people on social media, but I contact them, women activists who I knew in a way. So I used a circle of people around me and people that one stage further. I try to keep my interview. I choose my interviews from those circles of women digital activists who I knew because of my previous involvement in social media spaces and because of my activism background. So I contacted those women. Yeah.
That's really great answer. Really insightful.
Simon Ottoman.
I've actually got another question from Shannon.
Yeah.
Do the researchers see differences in the data collected online versus offline? Is there a different depth, quality, etc.?
I like this question.
Okay.
Well,
great.
because we had this debate. I think those of us in KAIS will remember last week there was a colloquium, and I think this was one of the issues that we debated on, and I think it's not fully settled, because I was saying I'm a sociologist, and I'm very proud of the fact that I have to go into the society and meet people, and I'm thinking that when contact is mediated online, it doesn't just satisfy me. So what I do is I try to complement. I use both sides. Now, the verdict is not in about which one is better. And as a matter of fact, what we are getting at is it depends also on the theme, on the topic. There are things people will talk to you freely if they are online. You're not seeing them, is something, and these are things they cannot talk to you, looking to you eyeball to eyeball. So I think the decision has to be about what is the subject matter. What do I want to talk about? I have background in studying terrorism, and oftentimes these are not people who want to come and sit down with you. And even when they're offering to sit down, you are also afraid. So sometimes it's like also talking to prisoners and some kind, or talking about certain sensitive issues. There are things people are much more comfortable to talk about when they are not in your presence. But when they're in your presence, they're not going to be very open. So you have to make that decision, But what I have known, and which I always say, is that if the decision is all yours, and if the scope allows you, have the best of both worlds. Online, offline, use online resources, also meet the people. I think they complement each other. It's not a matter of superiority. It's a matter of getting both words together, and that gives you a more rounded picture of whatever you're doing.
One of the advantages of being able to interact with people online is that you aren't limited to a sample that might be in the geographic area where you're located. So it's not only a matter of being able to go into what might otherwise be private settings or settings that don't welcome outsiders, or where the interviewer effect would be great because you would be perceived as an outsider. You have a broader reach. Now, as Edlin was just describing about the technology access limitations in the part of the world where he is, and that certainly, would be, a factor, if you're interviewing people who have those kinds of constraints. But in research where we can use, the kinds of platforms that we're on right now, where we can have highly interactive, participatory, creative, arts-based, elicitation kinds of interviews, we can collect very rich data that, yes, you could videotape an interview and be able to capture all of that data, but you really have the chance to bring together, all different, kind of streams of data, visual and written and verbal. So that, there's no one size fits all. It's really looking at the purpose of the study, the population you're studying, and the technology they have access to determine what's going to work best for you. Anything you want to add, Azada?
Sure. As you said, it's not about like priority of data, but for instance, in my case, one of the reasons that I decided to travel to Iran was I wanted to go beyond like following the news and everything through social media platform, because I left the country at the first days of women life freedom started. So I wanted to like go beyond this following the news on social media platforms and have like a kind of sense of being there and having the same experience that this woman had, because sometimes even through when I have like these interviews with with these women, I was feeling that I don't have the same experiences with them. I didn't have experienced that moments of fear, the moment of distress that they felt when they were like participating in the protest or like for their social media activity. So I think sometimes going beyond the digital world can add some value to the research, but as Adli said, it depends on the research and about on the circumstances of your research and what you want to do with your research.
Great, thank you so much. That was a very comprehensive answer. I've got another question here. It's quite a lengthy one from Amama. It says, how do we ensure that the information presented in the media, whether it be in the form of news, documentaries, are accurate? Misleading information has been used in the past to manipulate people, etc. And it can be tricky to trust the media. Do we rely on additional resources to objectively verify the issues? It's important to acknowledge our individual intersectionality that can affect our choices regarding gender and other demographics. Does that seem... So this is a question about ethics.
So are they asking in terms of if you're using kind of extant data rather than, you know, we've been talking about interviews, you know, whether, you know, how to evaluate whether that
how do you
is
verify,
accurate or not?
Yeah, accurate information.
I mean, I would suggest it, you know, using a triangulation approach for one thing, you know, to look at, you know, if you're, you know, looking at a particular phenomenon, you know, is that only being represented in, you know, from one source, or is this something that you can verify through other means? And, you know, if you're looking at media or something like that, you know, like what, you know, what's the editorial policy, you know, how is that, you know, writing been kind of legitimized before it's published? So, you know, I think it, you know, there's certainly important, particularly, I mean, for qualitative researchers where we're choosing limited amount of data and looking at it in more depth, and we, you know, want to look at it with more care. So, I mean, with Azadeh, since you're looking at, say, you know, social media posts, I mean, how do you verify that it's, you know, actually from a person and not, you know, a bot or something?
Actually, there's a huge problem with this, Iranian social media or Farsi social media, because in recent years, the social media in Iran has been influenced by cyber army of the government or by royalists or who have like lots of money and energy to put into bots, and I would say that it is a hard process to recognize if like an account is really a woman is behind them, because for instance in my choice I just wanted to be focused on the content which is produced by a woman digital activist. Actually I try to set up like kind of criteria to follow them, for instance, for a long time to see if there is any contradiction like between their tweets, but at the end of the day I can't be sure because it's social media and people can like fake their ID.
Thanks, Azadeh, for that really specific insight there. I've got a question now about GDPR. Does that sound like something that would be relevant for you guys and collecting research, particularly in the EU? A little bit of silence there. Perhaps we'll move on from that. That's no problem. I've got a question here about more sort of like methodology focused. So what kind of tools, this is from Ali, what kind of tools do you use for analyzing data collected from social media platforms or other online resources? I engage in social media discourse analysis research as well. Some methodological tips would be great.
I can answer to that. Actually, for the archiving the tweets, I used NVivo, and I used even like Google Sheet to like even categorizing things. But NVivo was helpful as well. But for the analyzing, because my research is qualitative, so I went through them one by one, and then I chose my content, actually my sample based on the like different kinds of criteria. For instance, I chose a system like choose a subject or event as a main or umbrella, and then I chose other events as the events that are related to that main subject. For instance, the death of Nikasha Karami, a 70-year-old woman, for me was like an umbrella topic. And then I went through all the images, videos, tweets that was like trendy or got lots of hits, and then analyzed them as well. I hope it helped.
I think for the analysis, in most times, because of the nature, qualitative research generally tends to lend towards what you can call descriptive analysis. And I think there's been a lot of work done on thematic analysis, and I've used it a couple of times, which is like one of the things you have to do is to have your specific themes and begin to input your information into these themes as a first step. Some people will now afterwards do what you call a word cloud, to show which one occurs more than the other and what have you. But I think at the foundation of qualitative research is this whole issue about how do we establish a high level of rigor, unlike what you have in quantitative. So what happens is you choose your themes and you try to achieve what we can call deep text analysis that provides robust information regarding each issue. You can also use contextual analysis anyway, to bring out the major issues that reoccurs. What you do when you do a word cloud, for instance, on a particular issue, you'll easily see where people are putting more emphasis. And for me, that is leading you towards a particular conclusion. And that is the way you do your analysis, basically. It's not something, of course, there are a lot of apps also you can use for qualitative analysis, so it's all a matter of adopting which one suits your study, depending on what kind of qualitative information you're collecting. If you're collecting things from X, Twitter, for instance, it's not going to be amenable to this kind of analytical procedure you use when you do interviews, even though both of them are qualitative. So I think it depends on your source and the kind of data you're collecting.
Thanks so much for answering that, guys. I got another question from Stephen here. Can digital research can digital research really be self-sustaining, or somehow, somewhere, does non-digital methods have to be used to support digital research methods? I think circling back to another question we had earlier.
There are lots of studies that are 100% digital research of all kinds, whether it's the digital ethnography, netnography, using online extant data that exists. It could be not only social media, there's all kinds of archival research that is available, archival data that is available, historic data, so they're and then in terms of interacting with human participants, there are, lots of examples of studies that are entirely conducted with data that's collected online. So I'm not sure what you mean by self-sustaining, but
Said
I
whether
think
it
I
can
think
be
that
it can be on
the
its own.
field of online research methods is certainly expanded, and we are talking today about qualitative research, but in digital humanities is a big field that is growing, computational social science and data science. So there are lots of ways that people are collecting data online and using digital tools to analyze their research, and then certainly sharing and disseminating the research online as well. I mean, when I first started working in this field, I mean, one of the constraints was that when you went to disseminate your research, there was a length limitation in a standard journal article in a print journal. Whereas now, we have the ability not only to, on the collection side that we've been focusing on, but on the dissemination side to embed video, to embed, to link to examples or, other source materials. So I think that it's a growing way of doing research. But, again, one size does not fit all. It really depends on what you're studying and what is available to you, what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think that answers it beautifully well, because I mean, for some topics in this day and age, you cannot but use only digital method. I mean, there are things you can't begin to recreate. It's not in all cases, like digital and ethnography, for instance. It's not every society you can go back in time. It will take time travel. Some of the societies you're going to even looking at are already extinct, but we need the story, So you can't do physical ethnography in terms of going to that place, So I mean, you have to depend on digital resources. And what has been very important is that I think we have to understand this is moving into the mainstream. And there's a lot of projects on digitization now, especially in terms of like artifacts. They are no longer left as just physical objects that people go to admire or look at. There's a lot of movement to digitalize them. And I think even in Africa now, we have a lot of them already being digitalized. And so, I mean, it's a movement. We can't go back. So it is self-sustaining. It depends on what you're looking at. But like I said from the onset, it's not about one or the other.
I've got probably what's going to be our sort of like last couple of questions. A question from Christiana that says, how do researchers deal with the issues of ethical considerations when interviewing someone online, owing to the fact that that there might be a sensitive issue or that a respondent may not feel comfortable discussing online? So yeah, opening this up to any ethical considerations that you guys all took when doing your research.
Well, I'll start and then pass it on to my friends here. One of the things that I think is really important when you're thinking about doing online interviews is to not think about it as just it's a single episode. I'm going to just, I mean, and this is kind of what my students would, they think I've got my questions, I'm going to ask my questions, I'm going to collect my data and problem solved. Doesn't really work that way. And in my writing, one of the metaphors that I've introduced is that of the gardener, to think about, you need to look at how you're going to cultivate a relationship. And you're probably going to need to think about having multiple interactions with someone over a period of time. So let's say, for example, you're thinking you want to have an interview on a platform like we're on because you want to see them and have a, rich interaction. But maybe preceding that, you're going to have some text message exchanges or some email exchanges, or maybe you even log in and just say, well, let's just, talk about kind of some background types of questions that will help to develop some rapport and to think for yourself, how am I going to establish my credibility as a trustworthy researcher, with this person, that they can trust that I am going to protect their identities and their protect the data. So, you know, just as we are going to Google people to see what we can find out about them, they're going to Google you to find out what they can find out about you. What are they going to find? You know, how do you present yourself in a way that is going to, you know, be credible and trustworthy as a researcher? So I think, you know, it goes both ways, both in terms of what we expect from participants and how we can kind of scaffold that whole research experience rather than thinking of it as a single event, but then also what can they expect from us? So Azada, since you were dealing with such sensitive issues, how did you establish your relationships with participants?
Actually, I want to answer to the question, but I'm not sure that if my question is completely relevant, but I try my best. I think I had a sense of guilt when I was doing my research. First, because of leaving my country when the protests started, and then I felt, okay, for me, it's a contribution. This research is my contribution. But at the same time, when I started to use like this women's narratives, the online narratives or the narratives that I gathered through the interview, I had this a sense of guilt as well for like creating a academic capital for myself through this like narratives and through these narrations that these narratives that I have with this woman. But I think first of all, I asked for a consent from my interviewees to use their content, and they gave me oral consent. I didn't ask for like a paper one because I didn't want to carry any paper with me. And I think those women made a conscious decisions to risk talking to me. So I think. If I do not push ahead to using these narratives and their experiences, I feel I would be letting them down in a way, because they take some kind of risks to talk about me. And I think I try to be like very protecting in different ways to protect their identity, protect the data. But at the end, I am using these narratives into my research.
I'm thinking there are just two more things we need to add, especially in terms of digital means of interaction with your participants. And if I understood the question very well, is whether the same ethical issues that apply ordinarily will also apply when you're doing digital research. And I think the same thing applies. For instance, even if you're going to get to somebody online through the internet, apart from the informed consent, which Azada has talked about, the respondent or the participant should be given the right of exit, which means you have to state at the beginning, before you start the process, that he has the right to leave at any time he feels. And ethical challenge is once a respondent leaves for any reason, you remove him from your sample. The second point is the respondent also has the right not to answer any question, even though it is online. So you can ask something that is sensitive or that may be self-incriminating. He has the right to say, please, I cannot respond to this. And normally, you should not push, no matter how interesting it is, you know. Then finally, this whole issue about confidentiality, it is usually very important. And a lot of us, we do not, you know, take. What I have done for my online respondents, and that's why I said, you don't just start. There has to be that initial interaction. Like Janet have said, you don't just knock on the door or intrude into somebody's internet space. I want to conduct an interview. One, you have to make the interaction and to know that the subject has to be discussed with the respondent ahead of time. And you have to justify, why is he part of your sample? You know, why not Mr. B out there? Because a lot of people who have research experience will tell you, even in face-to-face interaction, one of the things people will ask you is, why me? You're talking about abortion. Why did you decide on me? If you meet a young lady and you're talking about she was going to ask, why me? Why not some other folks? So these are some of the things. But I think every researcher should take seriously the ethical challenges that come with this field. It is good for you, not just for your respondent. You also need to protect yourself. Mm-hmm. And as much as possible, I know in so many universities these days, informed consent should be documented. It can be dangerous to say, I got an oral consent, because it's a matter of deniability.
Sure.
As much as possible, where it is possible, it has to be documented. Perfect. Nobody knows tomorrow.
Thank you for those wise words, Edlin. I'm just going to share my screen and wrap us up because we have reached time. So thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you so much to our speakers. Thank you for your brilliant questions, everyone who's been tuning in from all around the world. Before we let you go, I just want to remind you of a few things that are coming up. And they are this upcoming webinar, which is on June 26th. It'll look at how to write and structure an article's front matter. So that can all be found on our website. And ahead of us, we have not just that, but also on July 10th, how to get more involved with a journal and develop your career. In August, we have a session on how to collaborate across paradigms, mixed methods, and methodology. So you can go to the webinar homepage to find out more. We also encourage you to go back and watch the recordings of the other topics we've covered in the series, including how to write and format a manuscript and how to navigate the peer review process. Should you have any questions or need any support along your journey as an author, the Sage Author Gateway is Sage's dedicated space for author support and services. Visit the website for more resources, tips and tricks while writing, support through the production process, and help in publicizing your article after it's been published. Information about our author rights and reuse policy is easily findable for reference. And last but not least, we have a Chinese author gateway that features translated materials on these topics. Sage takes its role as a partner to authors throughout the publishing process really seriously. Hopefully this workshop has been helpful, but if you need additional guidance or a refresher, we have many resources on our website. For example, the Sage Campus platform offers a course on how to get published. We also have a 3-part video series with some great tips and tricks we've covered today, plus a handy PDF handy PDF guide you can reference and easily share with your colleagues. Just checking that's the last one. Yes, so just a last note before we head off, everyone who is registered but was unable to join us live will receive a link to the recording. Everyone who is currently attending the webinar live will receive a link to the recording alongside a copy of the slides and a certificate of attendance. We'll get that out to you in the next couple of weeks. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you again to our panelists and to our brilliant attendees who have asked such fascinating questions. I hope to see you in one of our future webinars, but until then, we'll say goodbye.